Hello, we are the group number 2 and we're going to talk about one of the most important themes in The Black Cat, written by Edgar Allan Poe. This is animal cruelty, also known as animal abuse. But what do we mean when we talk about it? Animal abuse is any kind of violence or negligence that causes harm, pain, or suffering to an animal, including physical aggression, lack of food and proper care, abandonment, and exploitation. This is a reflection of social violence and an irrational behavior that can have serious consequences, such as the death of the animal, and in many countries, animal abuse is classified as a crime that can be reported publicly and privately through the police or the justice system. Some of the most common types of abuse are physical violence, that includes hitting, mutilation, torture, and the use of tools to cause pain. Negligence, that is failing to provide food, water, an adequate place to live in, or veterinary care. Abandonment is leaving animals to fend for themselves, and it's most common to see in pets. Exploitation, that is forcing them to work in extreme conditions, using them in animal fights, circus, or experiments. In The Black Cat, animal abuse is a central element and a catalyst of the story. The narrator, initially an animal lover, becomes progressively violent toward his cat Pluto due to alcoholism. Acts of cruelty, such as gouging out the cat's eye and hanging it, mark the narrator's transformation into an irritable and violent being, which eventually leads him to murder his wife. The story explores themes of guilt, perversity, and the destruction of the human physique, where animals are victims of the protagonist's growing malice.
The narrator, who initially loved Pluto, disfigured him by gouging out of his eyes with a punch. Later, the narrator hands Pluto in a drunken fit of rage. Based on the narrator transformation, from kindness to perversity. The abuse toward Pluto marks the beginning of the narrator's moral decline, transforming him from a kind man into someone violent and ill-tempered. Consequences of alcoholism. Substance abuse is the main cause of the narrator change, making him irritable and allowing his worst self to take over when drunk. Catharsis. Pluto's death is not death but a tragedy that leads the narrator to commit even more atrocious acts, culminating in the murder of his wife. Projection of guilt. The second cat, similar to Pluto, becomes a source of torment for the narrator, manifesting the guilt and evil consuming him. Protagonist and his transformation. The protagonist of The Black Cat is an animal man, narrating in the first person. At the beginning, he is described as kind and loving toward animals. However, throughout the story, alcoholism and madness transform him into someone violent, cruel, and disturbed. Transformation is mainly reflected in the abuse of his cat Pluto, whom he eventually kills brutally. This act marks the beginning of his moral descent and later even leads him to murder his wife. The second Black Cat symbolizes guilt and inevitable punishment. List of the protagonist. Initially an animal lover, later aggressive and cruel. Alcoholic, irritable and emotionally unstable, unable to control his impulses, justifies his crime but cannot escape guilt, and represents human perversity and inescapable of violence and animal abuse. Throughout the story, Poe shows that violence does not appear steadily, but grows progressively. The narrator goes from small outbursts of cruelty to committing increasingly atrocious acts, reflecting his moral and psychological deterioration. This gradual progress shows how animal abuse becomes the basic of the tragedy, acting as a trigger leading to the most serious crime, the murder of his wife. Organized abuse. The narrator began doing horrible things to his animals, hitting them all, although he initially spared his favorite cat, Pluto. Honestly, after Pluto's death at the appearance of the second cat, he develops a deep resentment that turns into loathing. Although at the first he was careful not to harm him physically, his hate towards the animal grew so much that he wants to kill it every when the animals try to sit on his lap.
Culmination and consequence. Animal abuse because the cruelty of the final act of violence. His rage toward the cat transferred to his wife, resulting in the murder with an ex. Even after the homicide, the narrator continues to pursue the cat, blaming it for his misfortune. Beginning of abuse of character change. At first the narrator loved animals and had a special connection with him. The influence of alcohol changed his character, making him aggressive even toward his wife and pets. He changed symbolicity and moral discipline and the beginning of internal perceptivity. In The Black Cat, animal abuse is central to the story. The narrator is an animal lover because progressive violence toward Pluto due to alcoholism, active for cruelty, such as an odd cat eyes and in it, marking the transformation into interactive and violent person, was eventually married with wife. His redefining in various situations towards the story. Violence against Pluto, the Fritz cat. The narrator abused Pluto, his beloved black cat. Fritz he mistreated him eternally. The cruelest hold here and the first of the range, and directing him to free trim, killing him brutality. Pluto's reputation innocence suffering, but as so the reverse of all figured on and with him. He's making a pot of another tomb. The Black Murder show the narrator full restricts to his direct side of perceivability. One director mentioned that the act was motivated by perversity, the inner voice that pushes one to do work is simple because it is work.
Motivation. One night, the narrator returned drunk and felt anger because Pluto avoided him. He grabbed him tightly, and when the cat bit his hand, the narrator felt he was no longer himself and was possessed by a malevolent, drunk madness. He took his knife and, holding the poor animal by the neck, cut out one of its eyes. The next morning, although he felt pain and horror and deeply regretted the act, alcohol soon helped him forget it. Hanging of Pluto. Acknowledging his perversity, he decides to hang the cat from a tree. Soon after, his house catches fire, and on a wall appears the silhouette of a hungry cat, reinforcing the idea of inevitable punishment. The second cat and the murder of the wife. The new black cat, sharing characteristics with Pluto, constantly follows him and provokes his hatred. When he tries to kill it with an axe in the cellar, his wife intervenes, and he brutally murders her. The cat is trapped behind the wall with the corpse, and its mewing eventually reveals the crime. The house fire and the cat's silhouette. After killing Pluto, the narrator's house burns down. The next day, on the only wall left standing, the silhouette of a hungry cat appears. This image represents guilt and imminent punishment, as is the crime left an indelible mark of his life. It can be interpreted as a supernatural sign or a hallucination caused by guilt.
Appearance of the second cat. The narrator finds a second black cat very similar to Pluto, but with a white patch on its chest. This cat begins to follow him and eventually provokes deep hatred. The white patch behind to resemble a gallows, reinforcing the symbol of guilt, punishment, and the protagonist's troubled conscience. The new cat acts as a spectral double of the first, intensifying the narrator's madness. Although cautioned at first, his hatred grows until he wishes to kill it. Murder of the wife and conclusion. The narrator attempts to kill the cat with an axe, but his wife intervenes and he ends up murdering her. He hides the body inside a wall. In the end, the police discover the crime because the cat was trapped alive with the corpse and meows, revealing the hiding place. Final meow turns the cat into the instrument of punishment as if nature avenged the abuse. This demonstrates poetic justice. Animal abuse leads the protagonist to his downfall.
Alcohol. It is the catalyst and the personification of the evil that drives into animal cruelty, and in the story the narrator feels no longer like himself but as a mad and evil with drink, and it represents the loss of control and the conscious turns into perversity. The mutilated eye. The first frame act of violence leaves Pluto in an irreparable hole, symbolizing the narrator's guilt. The second cat, also one-eyed, serves as a constant mirror of the original crime. The chariot mage of the wolf. After Pluto's murder and the fire, the silhouette of the hanged cat appears on the only remaining wall. This symbol expresses the impossibility of escaping guilt and viewing or charming retribution. The gallows. It is the strongest symbol of inevitable fate. The narrator kills Pluto by hanging him, and the white pad on the second cat's chest gradually takes the shape of a gallows. Finally, the meows of the wall in cat reveal the crime to the police, sealing the narrator's final punishment. The abuse of animal in the Black Cat goes beyond physical violence. It reflects the protagonist's moral and physiological deterioration, his loss of control over impulses, and the inevitable consequences of his action. Edgar Allan Poe uses the cat as direct victims of cruelty, but also as a symbol of conscience and constant reminders of the guilt that haunts him. Each act of abuse represents another step in the narrator's descent into madness, showing how cruelty towards animals can become the catalyst for greater tragedies. The cats serve as agents of punishment and mirrors of his perversity, demonstrating that violence against other beings can inevitably turn back on the one who commits it.